Welcome to Alexa Developer Office Hours this morning. I'm your host, Amanda Lang. And today on the show, we're going to have some guests with us from the Alexa Tech Docs team. Really excited to get that started. Before we start, I do have one announcement. Don't forget to sign up or check out our next Tech Talk. It's about what's next in senior living. And I'm going to link the description or link the sign up in the chat for everybody. Grab that right now. Oh, got a little parenthesis that floated into that. We are going to have a special guest talking about how voice-enabled technology is transforming the senior living industry. We're discussing how voice-enabled technology is benefiting senior residents and employees of senior living communities and also creating value for those employees providers. We've had Alexa Smart Properties talks on office hours in the past, so this is an extension of that. So if you want more information about senior living in Alexa, tune in to that broadcast coming soon. And now we're going to go ahead and bring on our guests today. I'm going to introduce Tom Cooney and Paul Lewis from the Tech Docs team. Good morning or good afternoon. Noon for some of you, right? How's your day going so far?
Just great.
Yeah, going well. Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thanks for being on the show today. So we're here to talk a little bit about the documentation that helps all of our developers create stuff for Alexa. And I just want to talk a little bit about what you're planning, because I know that you have some plans on changes, updates to the doc, and it's not an easy job, right? You've got to plan for all documentation for stuff that's being changed, stuff that's happening right now. Anytime there's an update, you've got to be sure the documents are up to date. So tell me a little bit, first of all, about yourselves, what you do day to day.
Sure, I can start. I'm Tom Cooney. I'm the senior technical editor for the Alexa Tech Docs team. And I've been with Amazon for about 8 years and with the Alexa documentation team for about 4 of those years. And my job day to day is to ensure the overall quality and consistency of the documentation, working with our technical writers on making sure that they get their content out the door in as high quality as possible, and making sure that all the content hangs together and makes sense for users of the documentation. So,
Hi, Brian. How's it going today? Paul, would you like to talk about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Paul Lewis. I've been at Amazon for 11 years. I'm the doc manager for the Alexa Tech Docs team. So I work with the technical writers on the team. I work with Tom. Also work with our Alexa product teams and tech teams, essentially to figure out what documentation we need to deliver for developers, and work with the writers on putting that experience together, and also with Tom.
Cool. So let's talk right into the meat of what we're going to talk about today, which is how we're improving the documentation with feedback, what your plans are to improve the documentation for the rest of the year, and some of the research that you've done. Because I know you kind of have an announcement to make about that process today.
yeah, I can take this one. So back in late 2021, early 2022, the marketing team that's part of Alexa did a extensive developer survey that many of the audience may have taken.
Mm-hmm.
And from that survey, there were quite a few bits of feedback related to the technical documentation. And so the Tech Docs team took it upon ourselves to review, over 1,000 verbatim feedback pieces from people related to documentation specifically. And what we determined, which was interesting, was that there were a couple areas that needed particular focus. One was just the accuracy of the content, and by that, just keeping our content up to date. And then the other was around navigation and organization. And for the accuracy piece, we've launched a program with our product teams to update and check every single piece of content that is part of our thousands and thousands of pages of content. And we're working through that as we speak. As far as the navigation and organization piece, the verbatim feedback that we got wasn't unfortunately wasn't specific enough for us to make it really actionable. We've done a few things that we'll talk about later in the broadcast that we're doing around navigation and organization, but we wanted to do a much deeper dive into that. And so for that, we are actually requesting of our audience that if they're at all interested in providing us with more in-depth feedback about that, what we're going to do is we're going to set up a series of one-on-ones with developers for 45 minutes sessions, and do a deep dive with questions about the organization and the search and the navigation to try to get a better understanding about what issues and problems people are having. So this is folks' opportunity to really provide us with some great feedback that could really improve the experience with the documentation. So to that end, what we're going to do is we we would like our audience to send us an email with their contact information, and specifically they'll be sending it to Paul specifically.
On the
Yep,
screen there. Yep.
his address, and the subject line should just say interview on it. And we just want you to provide us with your contact information. And then what we'll be doing is um, we'll be reviewing all of the folks that have volunteered to take part in this follow-up survey, and we'll be choosing among them based on um, a representative sample. So not everybody will take part
Mhm.
in this follow-up survey, but a representative sample will. But we still encourage everybody, if you're at all interested, to volunteer to help us with this. So again, that's Paul Louis Paul Louis at
Yeah.
Amazon.com, and the subject line would be interview.
Mhm.
And then what we'll be doing is once we conduct these interviews, we'll be creating actionable projects to update our content and improve that search and organization and navigation experience. So this is your opportunity to really influence the documentation. So we encourage folks to sign up if they can.
Yeah. So if you're watching this live or if you're watching this on demand, I put the email address on the screen that you can email Paul. It's Paul Lewis, but without the S, cuts off the S. So Paul Louis at Amazon.com. And it would be terrific if you want to send us that email with your name, company, what the best time of day or would be
Yes.
to do the interview. I think is a good thing to add there. And just put interview in the subject line because we're looking to get some real deep dive one-on-one feedback about the best. Yeah, that's a perfect example. Like Brian Tarbox just said, request all documentation include both Python and Node examples. Yeah, I think we do need more Python in the docs. I'm a Python developer as well, and I always notice we fall short there. So that's one thing that we could definitely, I think that the
Yep.
one-on-one feedback would be really valuable. I gotta say, you're real brave for going through all the feedback from the developer survey. It's got to be a lot of work to sort through all of that feedback, especially since a lot of it was probably anecdotal, probably, paragraphs of people's comments, or in some cases, like, I know that when I'm accepting feedback about something, sometimes it's easier to see what's broken than it is to see how to fix it, right?
That's right. And I was the primary person that was going through all the feedback, so
Wow.
I could
Wow.
probably speak to this. But like the the feedback around adding more languages to our examples, that's been a common theme, and that's something that we are working on as well. But we actually got quite a lot of positive feedback as well, and I don't
That's
want to
good.
make it sound like everything was negative. Some people were very pleased with the documentation, and particularly the thoroughness of it, and even some of the more tutorial type and procedural type content that we provided. They were particularly pleased with. Um, I think one thing that's probably not appreciated is that as we develop the content, we're constantly under the pressure to update the content based on new features that are being developed. So a lot of our focus is there, and so what we want to do particularly with this initiative, is to make sure that we go back and we're doing a good job of making sure the content is well organized, it makes sense, and that it's up to date, and that it flows well, and that there's not any content that's repetitive or redundant or is no longer as relevant as it should be, and probably should be taken down. So those are all important aspects of what we do.
I did have a question from YouTube, if anybody wants to take that. What about Java? Now, I know we actually support more languages than just Python and Node, but I think our documentation focuses mostly on Python and Node. But is Java supported? Are we going to do docs about that as well?
I'll let Paul take this one.
I mean, our examples are primarily in Node and Python, as you said. Yeah, so around Java, I know we still have, especially in some of our older content, we still have some Java examples. For the newer examples, we haven't really been focusing on that. So, if there is, I guess if there are needs around that, I think we'd like to understand that a little bit more. And maybe that's something we could dive into in, the deep dive sessions that we're talking about. Because like currently, as I said, our focus is mostly Node and Python.
So it is supported as a coding language, but it's not focused on in the documentation. And one of the things that I think we're looking to do is understand the needs of people who want more documentation, because I do think that there's that section of like, I looked in the docs and I didn't find any examples in the coding language I'm trying to use, and now I don't know if you still support that coding language but I think, like for me, for example, I'm primarily a Python developer, but I do a lot of my Alexa samples in Node just because that's the easiest documentation to find. So I think there's kind of a little bit of chicken and egg there. Like, I'd rather do X, but I'm finding a lot of samples for Y, so I may as well, do it the other way. And maybe developers will lean in and say, actually, what we really want is more samples, in Y, Z language so that we understand. And there's also like a lot of stuff that's on the GitHub that's linked from the docs, but that's also been like recently updated a lot, huh?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say we, along with this understanding about, needing to add more, especially more Python samples, because the majority are Node examples. Adding more Python examples and making sure that our code samples, which are the larger fully baked projects of examples that we have out on Node are out on GitHub are up to date, and cleaning up that as well, because there's a lot of there were some older code samples and stuff in there that needed to be updated and improved or taken down because they no longer were useful. So we're in the process of cleaning that up as well.
That's great. Brian Tarbox mentioned, my buddy Noah would also want me to mention Rust. I don't know if there's any documentation about Rust, but I haven't looked since it's not my language.
No.
There's feedback you can give us in the one-on-one as well. So
yes.
I'll put that email up on the screen one more time. Email Paul. And just let us know if you want to do those one-on-one conversations, because we'd love to have the feedback about what people are using the docs for, how people are using the docs, what docs are missing from your life that you really want to see. I know in some cases, if you're a beginner, you're looking at certain docs, and once you become more advanced, may be some gaps that people don't even think about, like, because we aren't getting to that point, and some developers are really pushing the envelope. So it'd be cool to hear what people are really looking for and what they need to do. I have a question. It's just totally a personal question. Not that I'm in this step now, but I know some of our audience out there is going to ask this question. If I were to be new to Alexa development right now, what documentation should I start with? Because I know we did the Alexa Learning Lab and we wrote a getting started. Is that the best place to start now? Or is there a really good doc that I could also just dive in if I don't want to do the online learning?
Paul, you want to take this one?
Sure. Well, I think we were going to talk a little bit about the kind of overall search and navigation experience.
Sure.
I think, Tom, you're going to dive into that a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think one thing I want to mention here around getting started, and Tom, if you want to expand on this, that's fine. Also, is that we recently launched a new developer homepage experience for the technical documentation, and we are looking to help both folks who may be newer to building for Alexa, as well as those who have been with us for a while, who may be more familiar with the tech docs, just be able to navigate the content more easily and understand what's there. We do have a kind of a basic, kind of what is the Alexa Skills Kit or getting started document that I believe it's actually linked from that homepage. That's kind of a good place to just get generally oriented to building for Alexa. Tom, do you want to talk more about kind of like the search and
yeah, I was going to go ahead
navigation?
and put that screen up because we could look at that front homepage, and then we could just talk about like the best way to search and navigate those tech docs.
Yeah, this is the Alexa Skills Kit homepage, and one thing that we hear surprisingly from a lot of devs is they get a little confused between different aspects of the developer portal that are training or are marketing content, and I would recommend that depending on which doc set you are particularly working working with from a development perspective, that you bookmark the documentation pages specifically, because it can get sometimes confusing if you come in from the outside and you just Google a question, because you might get taken to a blog, you might get taken to a marketing page, you might get taken to training when you really want the documentation. So that would be my first recommendation. And then beyond that, as far as if you're starting to use the documentation, other than perusing the TOC here in the left nav, I think using the Alexa, the search box that is in the left nav rather than the one at the top is going to give you a better scoped search, because the top search is going to search basically the whole dev the whole dev portal, whereas this search in the search box that's in the left nav is going to search just the documentation, and it will if you search for something in there, I don't know if we can type in here. Let me see if I can do that. So if I talk about I type in an interaction model, let's say. It's a little slow right now. I don't know why. Oh, well, this is bringing up the full search. But typically, what happens when you type in over here? There we go. It brings up a scope search, and then it's subdivided by which document set, which is really nice. And then it has the terms the keywords are all highlighted as well. So that's just a little bit of a little tip and trick there, because it's not really clear. We don't really have any documentation about this, but that's a great way to immediately start diving in and searching stuff, and do so in a scoped manner. The other thing I'll mention is, we can go to the new homepage that Paul talked about. So they're revamping the whole developer portal, and they're changing the design of it. And as such, we've updated our landing page once again. And in this case, we've tried to do our best to highlight the specific topics that are popular and high hit count. And so we've created these sort of buckets for Alexa Skills Kit, Smart Home, Smart Properties, etc., and included developer reference in here. And then we've also given a tipping our hat to the training. If you guys haven't done any training using our training workshops. That's a new area that's really, really great. Especially if you're a newer developer and you want to learn a specific development technique for skill development, that's a great place to go. But yeah, this is a great landing page if you're looking more broadly at different types of skill development, and including Alexa development, including Alexa voice service. So that's that. And then the other thing I'll mention is within the developer documentation area of the dev portal, we have these new and improved menus, which kind of give you a nice shortcut into different areas of the documentation, given how big the documentation sets are. And so those are really handy if you're looking to a particular area of development that you're interested in, or you just want to browse and see what the capabilities are across the spectrum. And
I'm
then
going to link that homepage in chat while you're showing it
yeah.
off too. So if people want to click on that and give
Oh,
it a
great.
little browse themselves, they can do that.
Cool. Yeah, thank you, Amanda.
Yeah, and then one last thing, since we're talking about the theme of providing feedback on documentation, we've made some changes to how we provide, how customers can provide feedback, and this is on every single page in our documentation. And it used to be, if you recall, there was a tab over to the right that was sometimes not very discoverable. What we've done is we've moved the feedback mechanism at the bottom of every single page, and then it's just a simple yes or no whether a particular page of content has been helpful to you, and you either click yes or no, and then separately you can provide more substantive feedback. And so if you click on this, it opens up a Qualtrics page, and you can give us a lot more specific feedback on that particular page. And you also have the invitation to include your email address so that we can contact you directly if we need more information or to help make that page and that experience better. So in case you haven't seen that, that's a good thing to discover, and we encourage you, if you have both positive or constructive feedback on any page within our documentation, please feel free to leave us some feedback that way.
We've got some good comments in the chat about this too.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that feedback does go directly to the writing team.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a mechanism for reviewing the feedback that comes in. So we're looking both at the thumbs up, thumbs down, kind of in aggregate, and then we look at each piece of verbatim feedback. So generally, what we do is we have the tech writer who owns that document review the feedback, investigate the issue if there is one, and then follow up.
Yeah, that's terrific. I've seen some comments in the chat saying that you guys do a really good job of implementing the feedback that you receive. I see Doc's feedback capability is back. Trade Last saying feedback works. I've seen my suggestions implemented. So thank you. Kudos to you. Really reading the people's feedback and taking it into consideration. And I know we want to collect even more of that so we can continue to improve this documentation. And that is a good tip about the search bar. A lot of times when I run into a problem developing, I think the first thing I'll do is just type the problem directly into Google. And maybe that's not the most effective way to use our tech docs, because you might end up on some random page that isn't exactly what you thought, but it looks like it might be at first. So definitely the best way is to bookmark that actual homepage and go right into our documentation and search directly in the scope that you're trying to search for, right?
Exactly. Yeah, because your search is going to be scoped much more narrowly just to our documentation. Yeah. Yep.
So for folks who are doing, like, I saw there was a whole smart properties section in the documentation. So even if you're doing something for like a business or a firm, it's going to be easier to find it from that homepage, right?
That's correct. Yep.
So what about any other questions that we have from folks out there in the world? If you've got questions for the doc team, now's a great time to ask them. And we'll just talk maybe a little bit more about this page. Is there anything else that stands out that's a good tip for browsing this doc? I see there's that sidebar on the right-hand side.
Yeah. So within, we have this sort of 3-column experience for our documentation. And so the right column basically is sort of like an internal TOC for every page, because some of our pages can be quite extensive just because our content is very complex. And so that's a way of navigating and seeing what's on the page at a glance. So as you're going through and you're looking for particular information, and you're looking at particular pages, rather than have to scroll through the entire page, you can just peruse that right column, and you can see very quickly what this particular page contains. And if it's not the correct page, then you can move on. But then it also just provides a nice way to navigate through a page. This can be particularly helpful if you're looking at like API docs too, where some of our pages, because they're referenced, they're very long, and you can find a particular API listed on that right side and scroll through and jump around more quickly and easily get stuff. So it can be very handy.
And it seems like right on the left-hand side there for this particular doc, you've also got that how to create your developer account. So for the people that are brand new, they can click on that easily and get started that way, right?
Yeah, that was a marketing initiative. They discovered that a lot of people, newer users were sort of forgetting that step, or not aware that they needed to create an account in order to in order to really use the dev console and get going. And so that's been added, and it's been very successful. We've had a lot more uptick in new users, new developers using the dev console and using the documentation because of that.
And what about folks who are using an IDE outside of the dev console? I get a lot of questions about Visual Studio Code. Do you have the documentation for that as well in the same sidebar?
Yes. Let's see here. Hold on a second. Let me.
Yeah, no problem.
I think I lost my place.
For your mouse? Oh, yeah, it's a little. What are you sharing screen?
Hold on just a second.
Yeah, no worries. And keep in mind, folks on chat, if you've got questions, go ahead and ask them. We know that we don't always have the opportunity to have certain teams here on the show, so it's always great to see new faces and have folks help us out on office hours.
Here it is.
I'll take the opportunity to say that next week. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yep, I'll talk about next week later then. Yep.
So
you got it.
Yeah. So if you want to use the IDE, there's a specific IDE.
Oh, perfect. Some of my code is so old that it's in a Lambda console. Wow. What do you want to look at? Like, yeah.
Should be coming up.
We also have Skill ID in there for the smart property stuff.
CLI. Oh, yeah. So so this is a nice place to start if you're interested in using the command line versus the dev console. This is a nice sort of tutorial that gets you up and running with the CLI. And then there's extensive CLI reference. So you don't have to memorize
There
all
we
these
go.
commands. They're
There's
all
one
right
of those
here, and you can
long right-hand
learn them as you
sidebars that I
go.
wanted to talk
Yeah.
about. Yeah, the really juicy right-hand sidebar. It gives you a lot of
Yep.
stuff to look
And then
at.
we have two versions. So there's a migration guide for those that may have been using a V1 version.
Oh.
But yeah,
We had a comment in the chat about old codes. So yeah, if you do want to migrate to from V1 to V2, we've got you covered on that as well. Oh, my screen froze. I don't know if it's on my end. Uh-oh. Or maybe Tom's screen froze. Oh well. Let's keep on going though. I'm gonna take that off the screen for the time being. He's rebooting. Hey guys, this is a live show, so sometimes you get a little reboot or a little drop. I don't know if it's on my end. I was gonna take the opportunity to mention next time we're going to have a certification chat. So for those of you that have questions for certification, I'm going to be doing another certification show soon. I think we got Tom back. All right. Sorry about that. Did we lose you? You're back on the screen. Oh, his network is probably having issues. That's okay. No problem. It happens all the time. So Paul, before we, start to wrap up, because I know you all didn't have a lot to share. It's mostly about like how much feedback you want to collect and what you need to know from our users. But yeah. I do have a couple questions for you. Aside from just collecting feedback, implementing that feedback, what are our plans for Tech Docs in the future? Do we have like a roadmap that you can share, or is there just we're working on improving things and everybody's feedback being incorporated?
Yeah, it's a great question. So one thing we've been focusing on and making a priority over the past, it's been about a year now, maybe a little over a year, is building some new features and functionality into the documentation. So an example of this is within the APL documentation, we have what we call a code sandbox. Mm-hmm. And it what it does is it shows the source and then a rendering of how that will render on a device. It's actually a live window, so you can modify the source and then see the corresponding change in what will appear on the screen. So it's one example of a feature that we built into the doc. We launched that. It was about middle of last year. We went to a beta. And then we've expanded the implementation across more of the APL docs during the first half of this year. Something that we kind of went to general availability at the end of June of this year. So yeah, one example, but yeah, essentially like bigger picture. We're looking to, where we can kind of blur the lines between the development work that you're doing and the, being in the help, quote unquote. Mm-hmm. Where it's not so much I have to kind of jump over to the helper. I have to be thinking about that. It's more kind of staying in one experience. I can try things out. I can discover the relevant content, relevant information more readily at the time that I'm doing development work. So that's kind of the theme, right, that we're following, and then. I guess the other thing is kind of around large language models, which are certainly in vogue right now. There's a lot of chatter about that. That's definitely something that we're looking at as well in terms of potential impacts on how we kind of write and maintain content. Early days for that, obviously, it's kind of investigating and exploring what we may be able to do there to kind of raise the bar for the developer experience.
Cool. Yeah, we don't talk a lot about that just because I know there's like a lot of things going on with your team and everybody's team about what we're doing along those roads. But it's always nice to hear that people are thinking about the future, what everybody's working on. In terms of APL, I know that the community has really pushed hard and raised the bar in terms of APL and documentation and how much there is to find out there and everything. I know that APL has been updated pretty frequently with a lot more stuff, and we've had a couple guests on the show talking about the different updates to APL. Any more changes or exciting things happening in that world?
Yeah, we're continuing to build on that experience. We have a dedicated tech writer for APL who's kind of forming up our documentation plans going forward. More to come in that space for sure, both in terms of the content and then also, as I mentioned, kind of the experience of using the documentation.
I'm trying to bring Tom back on the screen, but it seems like his screen has gone dark for some reason. I don't know if it's camera issues. But I'm excited to see, because I know a lot of times when we're talking to people about APL, we talk about APL Ninja because they also have like the interactive model there. But it's really nice that the documentation team has also, especially for new changes to APL that we maybe have just pushed, we have that interactive code sandbox and that it's working for our developers.
Yep.
Have you gotten some positive feedback about that so far?
We have actually. So we look at the usage of the code sandbox. That's something that we've been tracking, and we're seeing a good level of engagement with the docs. It's not every single document where we've implemented that feature, but good level of usage of those documents and of that experience within the docs. So
I think there's some types of code where it's really, really good to have a sandbox, especially if it has that visual response. And maybe other documentation, it's not as important to have it, especially if it's like an API doc that's very in depth, like the ones we were looking at earlier. Having that to be interactive would be really tricky.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So certainly, situational in terms of where that experience works well. But yeah, it's been so far it seems to be kind of a successful foray in terms of what we've done in APL.
Can you talk a little bit about what are the most popular docs? Is it all getting started, or is there something that surprised you?
It depends on how you measure most popular. So if you're looking at usage of the docs, like our reference pages. So we saw the CLI reference earlier. So just given the nature of the document
Right.
and the need to maybe in the case of the CLI, maybe it's to look up a specific command or what have you. So those documents tend to rank most highly in terms of just overall views. The other docs like the getting started or what is the Alexa Skills Kit, right? It's a kind of an entry point for developers to get oriented. Tend to see a lot of views at those pages as well. And then the other pattern that we tend to see is as we launch a new product or a new API, we'll tend to see spikes at that time as folks are getting onboarded and diving into the docs to learn more.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, especially if it's like a blog post, something that's being newly announced. You want to have this documentation kind of ready to go, so people are excited to jump into the new feature, whatever it might be.
Yeah, exactly.
I think we might have lost Tom's camera. I see that he's blinking, like his connectivity is like blinking on and off. I feel a little bit bad about that, but I think it was really. I'm gonna try to bring him back on stream to wrap up the show for y'all. Let's see if we can get him. No, it's not working. Oh, that's the nature of Twitch. I've had Twitch streams where like my game didn't work or that I forgot to sign into an account or something. So everybody has those days. But it looks like it's just the VIA network. Last week I was having network issues on my machine, but I think they're fixed today. So, folks out there in the chat, if you've got any questions for Tech Doc Team, now's a good time to ask them. But if you have feedback for Tech Doc Team, I'm gonna put that email on the screen one more time. This is Paul's email. Send who you are, your company, best times they would like to do one-on-ones with you. One-on-one office hours, not like this, not the full broadcast, but a one-on-one situation where you can really give your unfiltered feedback to the best of your ability and let us know what you'd like to see in the documentation going forward. If one of us says, hey, I'd like to see more blah, we're just one data point. But if we have more developers talking about what they'd like to see, the more data we have about it, the better we are. So, and Any last words? I think we're going to probably have to sign off there. Thanks, Tom. I know you're having some connectivity issues today. Appreciate seeing you. I know you're in the chat still, so appreciate having you on the show. And thanks, Paul. It was great having you on the show as well.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Any parting thoughts for folks, or just, get that contact info going?
Certainly the contact info for the deep dives that we talked about, and then just another plug for the in-page feedback, right? So,
Click
those
that
thumbs up,
thumbs down at the bottom of the doc. If you like the doc, give us a thumbs up. We love to see those thumbs ups. And if you don't like the doc, please tell us why. Give us the details about what you'd like to see different.
Yeah, and that verbatim feedback that you submit using that same mechanism, that does go directly to the writing team. So.
Hey, I got a question. Since I still have a few minutes, I got a question on LinkedIn, and I don't know if I know the answer, but let's go ahead and dive into this a little bit. I'm going to cut you off, but I'm going to look at this real quick. When setting up skill linking, I think this is a account linking or skill linking. Skill linking. Does the project manifest mention of the linking task require the skill ID? Okay, that's definitely a question for my DAG team, not for documentation, unless you happen to know it offhand.
I don't know the answer off the top of my head. I'd have to investigate a little bit.
It's probably in the docs somewhere. Does anybody, I know I have a behind the scenes folks on DAG about, it's a skill linking question. If we don't know the answer right now on the broadcast, they will let you know what the answer is. Actually, this is a good time for me to plug the Slack too. We have a pretty active developer Slack, and if you ask your question on office hours and we don't have a ready answer for you, because sometimes they have to look something up, drop on the Slack and ask it, and somebody from our DAG team. That's our developer advocacy group. They're on here sometimes answering questions, and they are behind the scenes watching the show right now. So if there is an answer and we don't know it immediately, jump in the Slack. They'll get you started on what you need to know. So that's one other way to get in touch with us. If your feedback is about something else, if you just want to know more about what you're working on, jump in there. We'll get you sorted. I think they may have to look up the answer to that question. Yep. Okay. Say task name should be required, and they're gonna check the docs. Well, that's perfect timing for us having docs folks on today, because it's got to be in the docs somewhere, right?
There we go. Yeah, for sure.
Great question. And always thank you for any questions you ask during the show. Like I said, if we don't have if the guest doesn't know, DAG team will know, and if DAG team doesn't know, they will tell you in the Slack later. So we'll always find a way to answer your question if you've got it. Sometimes the community knows. I've had so many knowledgeable people watching the stream as well. So yeah, developer advocacy group in the docs both ways. Okay, excellent. Well, thank you so much for your question. Thank you so much for stopping by today. I always appreciate seeing viewers. Next week, certification. We're actually going to be talking about certification in Spanish-speaking countries as well. So if you have questions for our LATAM team, I'm excited to have that conversation, because I'm always interested to see what the LATAM team is up to, and what kind of certification questions are happening. Oh, and in Brazil as well. So Portuguese, Spanish, if that's of interest to you, we're going to talk about that next week, as well as your general certification questions. Certification is always a big topic. And documentation is really huge to getting everybody started. So thanks, Paul, for being on the show. Thanks, Tom. We will see you all same place on this channel next week. And there is more chat. And it's like, thank you so much, Doug, for finding that doc. Always helpful. If you have more questions, hit us up on the Slack later. See you next time.